Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at an interview between PC gamer and Masaki Nakagawa, more commonly known in the Final Fantasy XIV community as Mr. Ozma. Now, Nakagawa-san is the lead battle designer of the game at the moment, and as his nickname would no doubt inform you, has been with the team for quite some time. He's brought tons of fights to the game that are loved by the longtime players, and of course also brought us the most recent Chaotic Alliance raid. He's got a knack for maybe pushing things a little too far, and I don't think he's shaken that habit at any point in the last 10 years, but it is interesting whenever he has something to say. He's one of the devs that's also more closely involved with the community. On the day of Chaotic Alliance Raid's release, Nakagawa-san was going around on Twitter looking for people's feedback and comments actively, thanking people for any sort of compliments they had and making sure to parse any feedback that was present. So he's someone who is very, very much in tune with the community and what they want, what they like, and what they don't like. And that's kind of what this article is about. It's about their overall dev philosophy, problems they've had with it in the past, and things they've been looking to do to rectify it. And of course, the admission, as this title would no doubt inform you, it's simply impossible to make a difficulty level that's just right for all players. It's an interesting read. I made sure to give it a read before actually doing this video, but we're going to look at it a little bit more closely because I only basically skimmed through it. Now, I will include a link to this article in the description. Be sure to go give the original article any clicks or engagements that you can, as we are using their content for this video. This is by Daniela Lucas, published on January 8th, 2025. Missed this. Apparently, this was yesterday as of the recording of this video. I'm glad I'm getting around to it now. So let's make sure that we actually go down here. While Final Fantasy XIV is often praised for its story, it's the end game where players spend most of their time. That's something that a lot of people have fought back on me against lately. Strangely enough as it seems. I talk about how the story is something that, you know, people can like or not like in any given expansion, but they need to make sure that content is the thing that's getting people to stay subscribed. And I've gotten like backlash on that, like it's not true somehow as of late. Boggles my mind. Dungeons, trials, savage raids, and more casual endeavors, something we're missing in Dawntrail thus far. Final Fantasy XIV has something for everyone. The latest expansion, Dawntrail, has the best endgame yet. It's got a lot of mid to hardcore content, but like I said, it is missing casual endeavors, and again, I will keep saying, Cosmic Exploration or Crescent Island should have come out by now. Or sooner, realistically. Anyway, you want to know how the team fine-tunes the challenge across the MMO's variety of difficulties. I recently sat down with the lead battle content designer Masaki, Mr. Ozma Nakagawa, to chat about trying to please everyone in a genre where doing that is pretty tough going. I believe it simply implies, yeah, we just read that line. At least it was early in the article, you know what I mean? Each piece of content should be designed with a specific demographic in mind, with a difficulty that's just right for that target audience. At the same time, I also believe the content should still have something in store for players outside of the primary target audience. For example, Alliance raids are primarily designed for those who don't participate in high-end duties, such as extreme trials or savage raids. On the other hand, those who enjoy savage raids and other high-end duties may find Alliance raids are neither satisfying nor engaging to them. Alliance raids would just be boring content. So although we adjust difficulty levels based on the primary target audience, we still try to make the content as enjoyable as possible for all players, and we apply that philosophy to all content. Basically, saying that if an Alliance raid does some things right, then even a player that plays at a higher level may be able to find enjoyment with it. I definitely get this from time to time, and it was something Endwalker was largely missing. I really only feel like the on-release Aglaya ever really hit that last expansion, and that the only other time that a large-scale content before that did it was Bozia. Previous to that, we had the Stormwood Alliance raids and Eureka. So like when they're looking at those high-end contents, even in their, if they're not on these omega high difficulty curves, they can still be engaging in a lot of ways. And that definitely felt like it was lost in Endwalker, and it's got it a little bit in Juno. I'd say it's a little better, but only a little. It's more interesting. It's definitely got more value, but it also rides on nostalgia a little bit. So very curious to see where that will go for the time forward. Also, I guess, you know, it's funny when I think of like enjoyable as possible for all players, we apply a philosophy to all content. It's funny because I think of like the Arcadian, I think of like Honeybee Lovely, how everyone, it's like whether you're a normal raid player or a savage raid player, this character is either burned into your brain against your will or because you've become one of the hive. So I kind of see where even just like aesthetics, music, everything works in that. Obviously not what they're talking about, but it does kind of work out in that way. This approach makes sense, especially when put into practice. For example, patch 7.0, we added Warcore Lardor Extreme, that's Valgarmanda, which was designed with the target audience of players who are trying Extreme Trials for the first time. Very normal. Every time they do a new expansion, they treat the first few Extremes as if it's any player's first time playing, as if they just discovered Final Fantasy XIV, and this is the first on-content Extreme Trial they are trying. As a result, many players probably felt the encounter was easier than the Extreme Trials of the 6.x series. Yeah, I mean, the fire phase at the beginning, I'd say, is actually pretty on par with a lot of other stuff, but the rest of the fight after that, yeah, probably falls into that regard. But even so, I believe many veteran players still found the battle against Valgarmanda to be refreshing and enjoyable, thanks to flashy attacks and mechanics like Mountain Fire. For those who need a refresher, Mountain Fire is the tank buster that gave tanks hope right at the start of the expansion. It's the one where the tank blocks the hit, and then everybody behind them, basically avoids the giant fire blast that comes with it. Each tank gets the fire vuln, and you can trade off, use cooldowns, whatever your solution actually ends up being. And it gave a lot of tanks hope that there were a lot more interesting tank mechanics coming. That's probably, to date, the most interesting tank mechanic that's happened thus far in the entire expansion, which is a bit of a letdown, and I'm hoping that they look at Mountain Fire and how much people enjoyed that, and they start to do more interesting tank busters like it again. Please don't let it be a one-time thing for the entire expansion. But he is right. Everyone I know, experienced players, loved Mountain Fire. People who have played tank for a decade, people who play tank on occasion, even people just not even tanking, just watching the mechanic happen. We're just like, yo, that's so cool the way they did that. The whole fire phase, again, I think with Valgarmanda really it kind of hones in on what he's talking about here with things that veteran players enjoyed. A lot of spreads, a lot of baits, moving to one side, watching the outside of the arena, pretty decent damage check, mitigation checks in there. So yeah, it was really engaging. By approaching each content type for slightly differing players, rather than trying to please everyone at once, battles are able to retain their sense of uniqueness. Well, when they are unique, that is. Something that is particularly apparent since the Dawntrail expansion compared to the previous one. The level 100 dungeon Tender Valley is a great example of this. They're going to use Tender Valley? I'm surprised they wouldn't use, what is it called? Dreadborough? I barely do dungeons, so. Each boss has a wildly different battle flow. Yeah, you know what, though? That's true. Like, the first boss is kind of standard, but the second boss with watching all the bombs and the patterns, as well as the maze on the sea. Yeah, actually, that is a pretty good example. But I think all the dungeons, the max level dungeons, have done a pretty good job of varying levels, but I've liked all of them so far. Like watching out for the second one's bombs being sent through the tubes that blast across the field, or the bouncy council. I wouldn't even think about the bouncy council. I was thinking about the maze, making you dash for safe spots. The mechanics feel unique to the setting rather than just scaling for difficulty. Nakagawa talks me through what changed. So the difficulty of battle content in 7.0 and onward was discussed with core members of the battle team, including producer and director Naoki Yoshida, and certain aspects of her direction were changed compared to pre-7.0. Prior to 7.0, our policy of reducing gameplay-related frustrations was sometimes taken too far. Hitboxes. And in some cases, even the hurdles and frustrations that existed to make gameplay more engaging were eliminated, which made them less fun. With that in mind, we shifted to a design policy of placing greater emphasis on enjoyability. This major shift took place in 7.0 and 7.1. It was a bold decision for us with a lot of unknown factors, but we're relieved to hear people enjoyed it. The impact of this policy change will be more evident in future patches. Very interested to see how that goes. Yeah, I will say, so Dawntrail has been pretty easy overall for hardcore players, which, to be fair, I think at this point, if you're hardcore and you have been for 4 or 5 plus years, I think you've at this point, especially if you've done DSR or top and you've actually trudged through those, I don't think anything is going to feel that same level. I say this all the time, you can't make content for me specifically. As someone who's been around for the entire time, I'm always gonna find things I like, I don't like, but you really, you can never get me all the way, because I'm always going to have some reservations based on previous experiences. And as such, I think that they've generally achieved this with the majority of players. Most people have said good things about Dawntrail's combat content. Casual players having a mix of reactions to the more challenging dungeons, especially in the early expansion, but a lot of players who don't normally like dungeons actually having some compliments, and these things kind of imbuing skills onto players, or at least encouraging them to get better at certain skills as they actually progress through those casual dungeons, something Final Fantasy XIV really hasn't done very much. With the extreme trials, they mentioned Mountain Fire, but I'll say this, Zoral John, the use of the outer platforms, even with the eventual pattern recognition, was definitely new and refreshing as well, even if it was a much simpler fight than Valgarmanda, in my opinion, especially with the line that would detonate the AoEs with the stack markers as the final strats eventually came around, not to mention the cheese strats before that. I will say that Queen's Fiend, Queen Eternal, Extreme, super redeeming. Endsinger, most people thought was pretty underwhelming of an extreme trial, and this, I don't think anyone really felt that way much at all, both in terms of the music, in terms of the mechanics. Yes, the ice bridges are annoying, but that's one small thing, and quite frankly, we need a little bit of annoying once in a while. All of the Arcadian, pretty well liked, even with the undertuning of the final boss, and Fru, pretty much the same thing, even with Pictomancer being Pictomancer. So that's its own separate target. Chaotic, of course, having its ups and downs as well, but the general thing is most fights have felt more enjoyable while not necessarily being a higher tier of difficulty, which means more players can generally approach this content and actually get into modern design without feeling overwhelmed with stuff, again, like DSR Top Abyssos, where a lot of people were kind of pushed away from endgame during that time, especially with the other thing being Criterion and the more casual content kind of falling on its face, stuff like Island Sanctuary. So again, I'll keep bringing it up, but still something Dawntrail is missing, and they really should have had it sooner. The approach in earlier expansions such as Endwalker helped make the combat streamlined, but there were casualties in some fights along the way. Yeah, I mean, this was beaten to death last expansion as well. I'm beating a new thing to death now, but the homogenization of fights, the hitboxes being super large, uptime not really being a thing, but fizz range still being punished for being fizz range. The number of issues were prevalent and were beaten to death. And I again, Nakagawa, I mean, not Nakagawa, Mr. Ozma, he is someone who actually goes on like other social media. He doesn't just like look at the forums. He actually looks at different social media platforms and gathers all the opinions and tries to make adjustments as good as he can. Why didn't I say... for some reason, I convinced myself his last name was different than the name I've literally been saying the whole time. Clearly, I'm too tired. I think my hair is absorbing my brain at this point. Fights were fun, but lacked spark, making repeated visits a chore. Seeing Smileton pop up in a roulette elicited a heavy sigh rather than a joy. I love getting Smileton. Not because of the bosses, because of the song, but I love getting Smileton. Last boss is kind of cool. There are fewer specific fights I remember in Endwalker, even though I loved it a lot. I loved it as a lot of them featured similar mechanics. During the 6.x patches, we vetoed some interesting ideas for mechanics so melee players wouldn't be frustrated by periods of downtime when they can't attack the boss. Hear that, melees? You ruined everything. It's totally not all the players that have been longtime endgame players who said, man, that's frustrating, and then they listened to feedback, and then we then complain that they listened to the feedback. Totally not. It's only the melee players, obviously. That was the only thing that happened. I hope you can pick up sarcasm. Please, internet, please. So, frustrated by periods of downtime where they can't attack the boss. We removed them regardless of how interesting the mechanics could be. I wonder if we'll ever get to find out what some of those ideas were. Yes, we'll be upset that we didn't get to experience them, or maybe they'll get worked into future fights. But I wonder what they were. In hindsight, we should have properly weighed the interesting nature of an idea versus the frustration of being unable to attack, but our policies had formed an environment where such ideas were easily eliminated. Thank goodness they're throwing that out, because like I said, we've already gotten way more. Like, even just looking at, I'll use Honeybee Lovely again. The random nature of the line AoEs that come out during the pheromones is like, people both love it and hate it at the same time. Most of the time it's hilarious, but like there's no way to perfectly play around it other than as a player being able to look at and understand all of the information as it appears on the screen. And it's actually a really important skill to be able to teach players to actually use their eyes and look around. Like, even I still made mistakes on it after weeks. I'd look around and be like, oh, yeah, I already did all the movements I need to do. It's whatever. I don't need to worry about it anymore. And then I would die because I'm stupid. That's there's nothing. I would just look around and just be like, that's going to hit me in the face. I'm not going to move. My brain would just lapse looking at it because of the sheer volume. But it's an important skill to teach. On a lot of players, I've noticed especially in Dawntrail have an issue with like looking for mechanics that aren't kind of right in front of them. It's the whole looking around and seeing other things happening, which can be really important. It was something that made, funnily enough, Shinryu Extreme, the icicles in the back of the room, the tidal waves on the east and west side, very simple things, but they got a lot of people because a lot of people are just like, the boss is here. Why would the mechanics be happening anywhere else? You know what I mean? So glad to hear that they've eliminated that policy. A new direction. Thankfully, things are much different in Dawntrail. Bosses have their positionals once more, and recent duties like ultimate raid futures rewritten. The writing there was a little weird. Are stuffed with pockets of downtime that have jobs planning their rotations more. Maybe that depends on the job, because when I think of jobs planning their rotations more strategically, I think Pictomancer going, so I'm going to paint everything now, and then when you come back, I'm going to kill you. Monk, there are some jobs that are designed fairly well for it. Again, Monk being able to actually use perfect balance and downtime to come back to a stronger 1 or 2 minute window. That's interesting game design to me. That's high level design that experienced Monk players, they need to make sure they have that kind of skill in order to kind of accelerate their job to the next level. And there are plenty of other jobs. It's easy. Like, for example, when I'm a bard and I'm focusing on a brand new mechanic, or a mechanic, maybe I'm just nervous, right? And I just got to make sure I get this right. It's not that unreasonable to maybe like forget to play a song at a certain point, to be distracted by something. But that's something that comes with time, that comes with experience, and then still sometimes lapses. But you do have to do a little bit. But I'm not gonna talk up Futures Rewritten for that, because I think a lot of jobs cannot use that time very well. And in fact, maybe even dread that time. Then you have to get into the discussion of homogenization, of downtime. It's literally a never-ending cycle. Like, we're used to it at this point, but it's a never-ending cycle. From 7.0 onward, our policy is to properly assess and adopt interesting ideas as much as possible. Glad to hear it. There's a fine line between gameplay-related tension and fun. In moderation, tension makes for a greater sense of achievement when the hurdle is overcome and the content is cleared. Reducing tension and difficulties, in turn, can undermine a player's improvement and sense of achievement when taken to the extreme. With that in mind, reassessing the balance between a sense of achievement and the stress required to achieve it became our primary aim. It's worth reminding people at this point that a lot of the changes they are making are also going to eventually coincide with job reworks. We've been told 8.0 is going to see we've just been told that there will be a new direction in job design kind of in 8.0. And a lot of people are theorizing what that even means. I'm of the opinion it's not going to be as drastic as other people do. But you do have to kind of weigh whatever they're going to do in 8.0 versus the gradual change in design that we've been seeing with Dawntrail. So I do wonder what the end result will look like. And we might even get better ideas of that getting closer to 8.0 before actually hitting 8.0 itself, especially once we eventually get into like FanFest and stuff, which in theory should be starting later this year. For example, the Alexander raids at 3.x featured a variety of unique mechanics, including riding and operating a mount. I hated that thing so much. Oh my goodness. What a fight specific skill to need. Being quarantined in a room via a crane game mechanic. I like that one. That's A4S. Or transforming into a gorilla. I actually was a huge fan of the gorilla, of the transformations in general that came with, that's A5. So they specifically named A2, A4, and A5 here. And 2 of those I like. the Cobwalker, can't say I was a huge fan of it. But certainly, honestly, there have been worse ideas since. If we continue to veto ideas like those out of concern for frustrations, like losing DPS when I turn into a gorilla, our content will lose its diversity and all bosses end up following the same patterns. Again, something that pretty much happened in Endwalker. That said, we also don't believe that everything needs to be unique. After all, some battles should remain orthodox while others can be tremendously innovative. It was this ideology which led to the revision of content design policies, and one that desperately needed to happen. They've done a good job thus far. They've increased the clarity of what mechanics do, while simultaneously trying to make them more enjoyable by their own words. And again, I think that's largely been a success thus far, at least in terms of if you're someone who's actually doing the content that they've been releasing. With a new raid type, the Chaotic Alliance raid that pits 24 players against the more difficult versions of the old Alliance raids recently released, I wanted to know how Nakagawa and the team went about redesigning the Cloud of Darkness, one of the game's first Alliance raids all the way back in A Realm Reborn, to increase the challenge. During the 6.x era, we received a lot of player feedback regarding the lack of mid-core content. Man, I feel like I've gotten into this discussion a lot lately too. People keep asking me, what is the term mid-core? Most people have come to accept that it's a completely meaningless term. that's just kind of used person to person, basically giving it a different idea. But anyone who experiences the entire breadth of the game generally refers to mid-core content as entry-level endgame stuff, such as Extreme Trials or Savage. Now, Savage is where you get kind of a divergence. Like, some people say only Ultimate is hardcore, which I don't think is correct, but I think it is. It definitely falls in that category. Here, they very specifically define it. And as well as a strong desire for more large-scale content. The Chaotic Alliance raid is our direct response to those requests. With that in mind, we decided our target audience would primarily be those who fall somewhere between the Extreme Trials and first 2 Savage encounters, and we began brainstorming specific mechanics from there. So there you go. The team officially designates something between Extreme Trials and the first 2 Savage encounters as mid-core content. Now, I do think that that is still kind of not a wide enough berth. I think there are things that are present elsewhere in the game that should fall under that umbrella. The duels and Bozia, for example, DRS as well, that's Delubrum Regine Savage, as well as the other kind of locked away pieces, Baldessian Arsenal, DRS, things like that. Because they don't really require the mechanical prowess that something like an Ultimate or even a higher end Savage fight does. But they are ultra punishing for the level of mechanics that they do. So it kind of like blurs the lines a little bit there. Criterions and Criterion Savage, I think, could also argue that maybe they're like upper end mid-core, because I do think the Criterions in some places are harder than the first 2 Savage encounters. They're about equal in most cases. And then Criterion Savage is actually, I'd say, is hardcore, in all honesty. Even if it is the same thing, the level of precision play, that's hardcore, in my opinion. 20 minutes of no mistakes, that's a lot. Let's see. So going from there, and we began brainstorming. So we also created the raid with the goal of designing a unique encounter to emphasize the experience of battling in a 24-player group, rather than simply recreating an 8-player raid into one for a 24-player. So basically, just saying they wanted to actually take a boss that's made for 24 players and then make a 24-player fight. Yeah, no, they Cloud of Darkness, even though it uses a lot of the E9S mechanics, it's still very unique in the way it's put together. I mean, phases 1 and 3 were a huge surprise to me. I was like, wow, this is literally nothing like the Cloud of Darkness in World of Darkness. Like, there's like no overlap at all between any of the mechanics. So I was pretty surprised at how different it was. So I think they definitely got that down. Chaotic Alliance raids are a brand new type of content, so we're not sure if everything will work out as planned, but we'd be glad if you could try it out and let us know what you think. Yeah, I released a video about whether or not it's been successful, and I am still actively monitoring how it's doing, but I just realized I have like images and everything turned off so that you can't see all the ads or everything. And I went to try to check Tombstone. I know that it's like over 85,000 character clears, and I released the video, it was like 81,000. So still getting an average clear rate of like 2.5 to 3,000 a day for new characters on Chaotic, which is pretty good. We'll see when that eventually starts slowing down. If I've learned anything, it's that it's still hard to satisfy every playstyle, but Nakagawa wanted to make sure that everyone still feels heard. Different players have different feelings and opinions on the topic. Some may ask for dungeons and alliance raids to be made easier, whereas others may want 24-player ultimates. I know exactly who's asking for that. Even I'm afraid of that. So see, it's not me. I was worried enough about Chaotic. If you think I want 24-player ultimates, I am frightened beyond belief at the idea. Or content that surpasses even Ultimate in terms of difficulty. That to me is silly, because it's like, just call it Ultimate, and then if it's the hardest Ultimate, then it's the hardest Ultimate. You know what I mean? I believe it's fine for opinions to vary. Whatever your opinions may be, we respect them and take all player feedback seriously. And of course, we will continue striving to outdo ourselves and create battle content that's even better than the last. And that's the end of the interview. Then it just goes into the other articles, which you can't even see because I've shut off JavaScript and images, so it's all that stuff is gone. Overall, a pretty interesting insight. It's good to hear. It's a little depressing to hear that we probably missed out on some really cool stuff in Endwalker because of the philosophies and the policies that they had in place. It just goes to show that like it was a fundamental flaw in the way they wanted to make content in Endwalker. Like, there were some okay things in there, some things that people really enjoyed. I know a lot of people, for example, really liked Athena, but, or at least phase 1. Phase 2 is 50-50. Caloric actually one of the ideas that they made work, but I'm sure there are a lot more fun ideas because Caloric at least you can still do in melee range because the boss's hitbox is literally the size of the entire arena minus like one small corner of it. It's just, man, I just wish we knew. I wish we knew what mechanics we missed out on. I really hope that like at FanFest they do something like what we didn't do. I know a lot of people go to like, oh, they should just release the original versions of it. And it's like, it's funny because we've had dungeons teased in trailers that have mechanics that we don't get. In fact, that happened with Pandemonium in Abyssos, the tree, Agdistus. There's literally a mechanic in the trailer that is not in the final or at least a combination of mechanics. All the individual mechanics were there, but it's a combination of mechanics that is never in the actual fight. I remember another one was St. Motion's Arboretum. I believe the trailer showed us a combination of the same mechanics that never happens as well in the fight. So we've kind of gotten glimpses into it in the past. And I wonder if at any point they'll ever consider taking that extra step. I really do wonder, because I think a lot of people, if you listen, he listens to feedback, you know, it's interesting. All the assets are there. I doubt they kept all the like data and all the information for that, but like something in the future could be an idea. Like just release the dungeon Tender Valley dev version. Just call it the dev difficulty or something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing fun ideas, but either way, it's always good to get the dev team's insight into the content development, even if this is just specifically battle stuff. I don't need to say it again. Just, you know, what I said earlier still holds true. But it's an interesting interview, and I'm glad I got to share it with all of you. So let me know what you think in the comment section of the video below. Do you agree with some of his assessments about how some of the content has been, and both statements about Endwalker and Dawntrail thus far, and a statement about midcore? I'm sure it'll be a fun discussion in the comment section. But let me know. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned. I've got some more 14 mobile related stuff I didn't get to before the new year, as well as a handful of other videos planned for January as well. With that, I will see you in the next one. And until then, take care.